Welcome to our talent track number 5. Great to be here with you today. Welcome to all our participants in Zoom and LinkedIn. My name is Lukas Hofmann. I'm a trained product designer and product manager at International Design Center Berlin. Leave your comments in the chat if you have any. Hi from Berlin. I'll catch your questions and try to make the best of them and share them with our speaker today. Yeah, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 5th of our talent track sessions, where we present outstanding project from the New Talent Award category of the UX Design Awards. We offer behind-the-scenes looks at award-winning projects, shine a spotlight on some of the most promising young, experienced designers out there. And today we are here to shine that spotlight on our guest Thomas Müller and his award-winning project Haptic Labs IO, a toolkit for prototyping with real haptic feedback in human-machine interactions. The awards are a global competition for excellent experience design organized by the IDZ, International Design Center Berlin, a leading German design nonprofit institution, member-based in Germany since 1968. And our mission as IDC is to promote the value of design in business and society. We do that in the field of UX design in particular with our UX Design Awards since 2015. We're trying to raise recognition for UX design in general and show how good UX design can be responsible, integrative, and even empowering, creating opportunities for all. The awards are endorsing companies and individuals who submit designs that stand out, being especially innovative, offering intuitive access to a good overall user experience, and create satisfaction for the user. And besides labeling the best practice examples to the outside world and promoting great examples of UX across industries and fields, the awards are also meant as a platform striving to cultivate knowledge sharing and networking between UX professionals. Our current call for submissions has just been extended to December the 3rd. That's next Friday. So if you have been hesitating, fearing the deadline that's closing in, you just want some time, show us what you've created, make it count. But for now, enough of the awards. Let's talk about a winning designer and its creator, Thomas Müller, who's here with us tonight. He will tell us about his award-winning design toolkit, the idea and the principles behind this whole universe he built around haptic digital human-machine interactions. And it's my pleasure to introduce Thomas Müller, New Talent Award winner 2021, as a mind and maker behind Haptic Labs IO. Yeah, a toolkit that allows UX designers to prototype and test haptic feedback without programming skills and all the tinker legwork that usually goes with it. But Thomas will explain that in detail much better than I do. So here he comes. Thomas Müller, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Lukas, for the great introduction, having me today. It's been an honor being here, receiving the award. And of course, also thanks so much for everyone joining me today. I'll just continue by sharing my screen.
Let me just add, in case I forgot, if anybody has questions, show your hands physically if you like, switch on your camera, step forth and ask. That's what we've met for. Sorry, Thomas.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I just start by give a brief introduction. Lukas basically covered a lot of ground already. I'm Thomas. I'm an industrial designer by trade, and more recently, I've been settling myself between like the intersection of traditional industrial design and the digital world next to it. And since 2 years, I've been now working more intensely with haptic feedback. But yeah, I studied industrial design at the HFG Schwäbisch Gmünd, southern Germany, then moved myself to the far north in Sweden, to UIT in Umeå, where I studied advanced product design and also wrote my thesis, which is basically the basis of Haptic Labs and .io. And currently, sorry, I'm located in Dresden, working part-time at the university, at the technical university over here, building, again, micro-tactile prototypes. But more on that later. Let's jump directly right into it. As I mentioned, I wrote the thesis in Umeå, up north. That means there are a lot of dark hours in the winter times, which can be a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to explore like different areas and topics. And one of those were for me push buttons, because I realized at some point I've been using them in a lot of prototypes, products, but never really explored which should I use, how should they feel, etc. And if you think about it, like you're pressing them dozens of times a day on your phone, on a remote for your TV, on your doorbell, but you never really think about it. And because I have like a tendency to jump into rabbit holes now and then, I began like more exploring what are different buttons, how are they kind of built up, what are different characteristics, what are the parameters, how can you influence them as a designer? This, of course, is always super interesting. And how should they actually feel? Because there are like a vast amount of different characteristics, from turning on the machine to deleting something, pressing a key, etc. So I immersed myself into the whole world of push buttons, wrote kind of a Medium article about that. And while I'm mentioning it, that this was kind of the starting point for my journey into the world of haptic feedback. And I realized I just like scratched the surface of this whole topic. And it was the same time where it was for me to choose also a topic for my master thesis. So I thought, well, this is interesting. I have no idea about the whole thing. I'm not sure where this is end up. So it's a perfect opportunity to just explore it and yeah, dive into it. And yeah, in retrospect, I'm super glad also took that opportunity, and also UID and my supervisor dealt with my shenanigans and pushing a bit the boundaries of the program over here. But let's start right away and cover a bit what the heck is haptic feedback at all. So to show you that part, I want to do like a quick experiment, and everyone who has the opportunity just grab something from around the table, a mug, their phone, their mouse, whatever is around them. Put them in your hand and think about, what do you actually feel in this moment with your fingers, with your skin, maybe also your arms, your body is involved into it. And something you might think about is like the texture for a mug. That could be, is it ceramics? Is it soft? Is it rough? It could also be the temperature. Is it maybe a metal cup? Is there hot coffee in it? It's also about the location where it's sitting with the fingertips, maybe where the handle is putting on your index finger, how heavy the whole thing is, how much pressure it forces onto your skin. There's also something called slip, like you know how hard you need to grasp this cup for it not to slip through your fingers. If you're maybe getting like a pouring of more coffee into it, you could feel the vibration, or if you have your smartphone, you know what I'm talking about. And maybe if it's too hot, you also feel the pain. And all of these kind of topics are part of tactile feedback, so everything you're sensing with your skin. But there's also a completely other world to it, like covering the weight, how much coffee is inside of it, how big is the cup, the orientation, how it's located in the room, the movement that you're doing with your hands, and all of those parts are part of the kinesthetic feedback. So haptic feedback covers kind of both aspects of that. But what we are going to focus on is the first one is the tactile feedback. And what's really interesting is that we are extremely conditioned to visual impact input from displays, etc. But every interaction with a physical product involves haptic feedback. Like when you're closing a bottle, when you're handing out money, or just shaking hands, you can't like deny that, but most often you aren't aware of it. And only when it's somehow interfering, like when you're outside in cold weather and you're trying to close a zipper, you might have some difficulties, or you're looking for the light switch in the dark, basically. And there's also another dimension that I want to cover next. And this is actually the one that most people think about when you're mentioning haptic feedback. It's the vibration that you're most often experience from your phone, or maybe a gaming controller. And this part is kind of the haptic and the active haptics, where having a motor sitting inside of it, it's rumbling, and we could cover a whole hour of different actuators on that. But for now, let's just keep in mind something is vibrating, basically. And the question is now, why is this so interesting, especially to industrial designers of physical goods? Because it comes with a lot of benefits and advantages. Some of them, for example, if you're again taking a look at your smartphone, it's very private. If you're receiving a call or maybe just a short message, only you will recognize that. It's also very subtle, or it can be very subtle, so it's not really interfering. You can still talk or drive your car, so that's a big advantage. It's also interesting that it's always on, like you can't really turn off your skin, like you can shut your eyes or put on some headphones. And it's also very obvious, and rather like you can very quickly react on it if it's designed the proper way. And with that in mind, the question can arise, why are there so few products making use of it? And the reason for that is that you need to know a lot of things, like you have different actuators, you need to have some soldering skills, some programming software skills to design it, you need the tinkering skills to build like a prototype, try out where on the body does it feel in which kind of way, and most often you're a bit lost and then have to really dive deep into literature, physiology, psychology, etc. And in summary, the reason is that this process is just very complex, and people tend to not have the whole aspect of all those expertises, or there's just no time or room to explore it. And I thought maybe that's just me lacking those skills. But like by talking to users in the field, I think I've done around 30 interviews back then with experts, novices from design, manufacturers, etc. It came out like it's not only me having these challenges, but it's really the lack of time to explore. Usually designers are not really trained to design haptics. And in some cases, it can also, or it leads to the point that you rather have no haptics than bad haptics. I thought that was a nice quote over there. And by that time, I realized maybe it's not really the final goal to design products with haptic feedback for me during my thesis, but moreover, how might I access the haptic feedback to more people, designers, researchers, engineers, basically to anyone who's interested in the field. And two things stood out over there. The first one is kind of the knowledge base. It's very time consuming, acquiring all those expertises. So something easy to digest, like the haptic feedback for dummies, could be an awesome asset during that time. And the second part is the prototyping aspect. I had some previous knowledge in that field, but even for me, it was really challenging to prototype and design it. So something like a plug and play, a prototyping kit, I would have really appreciated. And kind of the best way to understand those issues, besides talking to people in the field who experience it and doing like proper research and literature, is to immerse yourself in these kind of situations. So for the first 4 weeks, I took one object around myself and thought through the process. What if like the camera would have haptic feedback that tells you when it's leveled, or the door handle which vibrates when you shouldn't enter maybe the door, maybe there's a meeting inside, etc. And I walked kind of through these processes, built a lot of prototypes, because that's actually the only way to judge or experience haptic feedback, obviously. And out of those kind of explorations came multiple learnings. And for example, the topic of opportunities, like now you're able to use it, but where does the opportunity lie for future interactions? And there's again like a vast, it's a very large topic, but to pinpoint two of them, for example, the topic of humanizing interaction is super interesting, with also the more recent actuator technology. It used to be this just a rumbling thing, very undefined, but more recently you really can mimic even like a more humane vibration pattern, or just a pulse, like something is tipping you on the shoulder, on your foot, etc. Or another to point out is something like the topic of branding. Everyone's aware that companies have a special jingle to be recognizable, but what if different companies had like this haptic brand? It's really beginning to start in the automotive direction, but there, again, a whole different chapter, a lot of opportunities. And another thing that really stood out, which is very essential in working with haptics, that it's always highly context dependent. And just because something worked in the one context, like in the kitchen, where you get feedback when the oven is ready, I don't know, is completely different than you're having feedback in your running shoe when you're out jogging. And again, just to pick one aspect out of this is, for example, how often are you in touch with the object, or how long? There are some products really predestined for it, like a smartphone or smartwatch. That's also why they tend to have a lot of advanced haptics in it. On the other hand, maybe your washing machine or your desktop lamp, you're rarely getting in touch with them, or just for a short amount of time. So they need a completely different approach to the topic. And I mentioned before, like every application needs a tailored approach. And another topic here is that the perception of haptic feedback is very differently distributed along your body. I had one project with Intuiti Media Lab in Stuttgart, where it was about like a helmet. How could we introduce haptic feedback in there? And that was super interesting and a very challenging project as well, because we're so sensitive, not only to vibrations, but also to auditive feedback in that area. But I made use of all of those kind of learnings and condensed them in the most easy way, because I also had the goal at the end not only to do like a documentary, like a standard one that might end up in a shelf somewhere, but also offer something like a starting point for other designers, to start with, have a bit of an easier access to the field. So with that in mind, at this point, you should think like, now I have the basic knowledge, I have this idea, let's just start designing and then implementing. But in reality, walking through a project, there are a lot of steps in between. For example, we have to define how should it feel. There it already starts, like we're really lacking the right language, like something is vibrating, but is it soft, is it sharp, is it rumbling? Like everyone has a different imagination also on that. You need to modulate it. There's the frequency, there's the amplitude, like the intensity, the duration, is something fading in and out. And you also, very important, have to integrate and test it in the material, because as you can imagine, if you put like a motor in a rubber thing, it will vibrate or feel different than when you put it into like a metal box, etc. And to make matters kind of worse, even if you're experienced, it's a very highly iterative design process. So you can't just straightforward walk through it, but there's a lot of like going forth and back until you're reaching a point where you're satisfied with it. So if your setup looks like something like this, you have a coding environment, you have electronics, and like this Frankensteinish prototype, a lot of people are scared, and the complexity of it really limits the creativity. So the goal would really be to have like a no-code plug-and-play toolkit, because also for designers, it's often less about creating like a fixed, perfectly manufacturable working project, but more create the vision and concept to show to people, users, etc. And from there on, the Bzzz became more or less a bit more the classic design process, looking into the journey of designers, what would they wish for at which point in time, building again prototypes, click prototypes, paper prototypes, and like the pandemic also didn't make that part easier. Because if you're describing like to someone over Zoom, like this vibrates like a toothbrush, but it is sharp and like in a pulsating manner, nobody has any idea what you're talking about. But yeah, the workaround was really having a mix of it, some functional, some more descriptive, some visual. Video was also a big aspect out of this, or sound in the end. And the outcome after this whole research and concept phase is what's called Haptic Labs IO. And Haptic Labs offers basically the haptic ecosystem to bring you from idea to user testing within a day. Because previously that took really a long time, weeks, can be months, etc. But providing the proper tools, it's really possible to amplify or fast forward the ideation and concept part. So there are two things. On the one hand side, the prototyping kit, which I'll talk first, and then there's also the knowledge base as a second part. So on the software part, it's a feedback composer. It doesn't require any coding, and it's meant to be really easy and intuitive to use. And one aspect of that was also referencing established components, like when you're arranging music, when you're cutting a movie, etc., but introducing a new way kind of to visualize and design haptics. So what you can see over there in the bottom right corner is one of the tracks, and you have different blocks. One of them is the vibration in green. There's a pulse block in red. There's a pulse block in blue, and now you can maybe get a peek of what this could feel like in the end. And this whole system really allows this quick iteration. So what you can see here, 2 vibrations, short break in between, it's like a maybe like the battery is getting a bit empty. But then you can also change it, maybe create a bit longer vibration in the beginning, shorter in the end, so it becomes maybe a bit more prominent. Or you switch it around, the intensity, now it's like a maybe now the feedback is like the battery is fully charged. And yeah, the great advantage is that you can very easily play around with that. Also create like something maybe more fading in with a pulse, distinct break in the end, or just go really crazy. I don't know what this could be, but let's find out. And one of the biggest advantage of this approach or of the composer is that at any point in time, you can also trigger the feedback through the satellite unit. I call it the hardware part. Over there, you can attach the actuators, which is like an electric motor. I talked earlier, but there are a whole different stuff going on. And because it's wireless, you can also really easily put it into different objects, different users, wherever you are on your benchtop or in a user test, maybe on your workshop. So with that equipped, the actual fun part really starts because that one is about exploring different interactions. So just, yeah, join me on this short journey. What if you could feel like when the drill is leveled, when you're drilling a hole? What if you could feel like which way to turn when you're driving in traffic with your bike and your helmet starts vibrating? Or you could feel the pulse of your patient. What if you could feel when an email is arriving and your desk maybe is shaking, or your office chair, or you're touching like a knob? Maybe it's a mixture in music, or maybe it's just the oven, and you directly feel what is the interaction like lying behind? What is the characteristics? And by this kind of approach, it really offers the opportunity to explore this vast amount of uncovered kind of territory, in my opinion. So we are extremely happy that we had the chance also now to put this toolkit into the hands of students about a month ago, I think. This was at the Technical University in Delft. It was a course with master students and design course. And they had the opportunity to just play around with it, putting it into different materials. What if your shoe would shake? What if your blanket would shake? And it was the perfect scenario for this hands-on exploration that previously was limited or only available to expert users. So the vision is really over here to help democratize also the whole field of haptics. And in a bit more detail, it's about making the design and prototyping part or process easy. So it's the first step. Maybe have a paper prototyping of the drill. So you can just put it in, do like a Wizard of Oz, fake it till you make it approach over there. You can put it onto different materials, see how they would react to different objects, different placements. Through the UI, you have the possibility then to define the interaction. How should it feel? Which characteristics? Should it be urgent? Should it like be soothing or something in between? You can also use it then to integrate and evaluate it in user tests, and finally push it up until the implementation. And previously I mentioned we, so I'm extremely happy to still keep developing the toolkit. I have now 2 developers in my team, Yannis and Michi, and we're pushing this whole topic forward. It started last year with this very beautiful looking prototype, but it was super mesmerizing to have something working on your tabletop. We are now at the stage where the composer is fully functional. We have our own dedicated hardware available, and are kind of eyeballing beginning of next year for our first release. We're talking with first pilot customers at the moment, or pilot users, to frame it, to again kind of gather feedback. Is still what's needed, what's the preferred functionality, etc. And there's also more to come, looking more into demonstrators. What's the opportunity again for something to click on, to turn, to quiz? What is the pros and cons of different actuators, to basically equip everyone who's interested with the right tools to start right away. And coming to the end of this short talk, we have something ready already on hapticlabs.io if you're interested. I haven't even touched the whole topic of design principles. If you're interested in that, what to look out, how to avoid pitfalls, etc. There's a lot of material and stuff up there. There's also the introductory tutorial covering really the basics, starting from tactile to kinesthetic. How is it perceived? What are actuators? Different terminologies, etc. And on the other hand, really the vision is to kickstart the exploration of new products and interactions, now to have this field more accessible. I'm extremely curious what like the next iteration of designers will come up with, and what interactions and products they might create. So with that, I wanted to say thanks for joining me today. If you got curious, visit hapticlabs.io. A warning, this whole topic can be very addictive. Feel very free to reach out to me, talk about haptics, have a virtual coffee, collaborate on this whole topic. I'm super happy to share my experience, my knowledge. So yeah, feel free to reach out. And because I'm most active, at least these days, on LinkedIn, feel free also to ping me there, follow Haptic Labs. And we also have a newsletter giving out some updates, what we've been up to. And with that, thanks again for having me. If you have some comments, thoughts, questions, feel free to put them in the chat or on LinkedIn, and I'll try my best to cover it.
Oh, impressive. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking us with you through this rabbit hole of push buttons. It was a really impressive demonstration to me of how you should show a design process that really worked nicely. And I get comments just like this in the chat. So great work, really. I was wondering, before I switch to the questions I've already collected, I was wondering, I've seen that you have some quite crazy corporate internships in your CV, actually more than I have semesters in my curriculum. So that's really, really impressive. When did you do this? This looks like a crazy amount of prototyping and iteration loops. How long did you take for Haptic Labs IO before you got the developers on your side?
It's a good question. So I wrapped up my thesis and graduated June, July of last year, and I think there were 6 months in total where I immersed myself into that whole field. And yeah, I mean, also a big shout out at this point to anyone who supported this whole field, because it was both users but also experts without whom this wouldn't have been possible. You mentioned all the prototypes, like to evaluate them and pushing me into the right direction. That helps tremendously.
So it's not just intense, it's also pretty fast. I mean, 6 months for all this, including the documentation, that's really good. Wow. By the way, if anybody's interested, take a look at Thomas' portfolio. He's also showing more of this presentation skills on classic product design with the user in mind. It's really, really well done. So I think I'll switch to the question from the chat. We had Manuel Saint-Silly, I hope I pronounced those right, sorry, with a question. Sorry?
Yes, that was a perfect pronunciation.
Okay, perfect. Step forth. If you want to ask acoustically, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Thomas, amazing job. I used to work on immersion in the past in the haptics UX department, so your work would have been so much helpful for me 2 years ago. I'm just happy that we finally get someone actually providing that to the community. So my question was about the kit itself. I understand that there's the software aspect that works actually on the mobile phone, which is actually very cool too. But when it comes to the hardware, is it something that people should, get themselves on Amazon through different actuators and so on, or is it even a kit that is provided by Haptic Labs that you purchase online?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question, and also thanks so much for the feedback. I'm super, super happy you found it useful. That's a great pleasure to hear. It can be both, but what I'm aiming at the moment is what you just described, like providing this full package, because even like when you start, maybe you have the experience yourself, you're just typing like vibration motor, like there's a whole bunch of different ones. And it doesn't end by vibration motors. There are solenoids, there are surface speakers, etc., wideband, low band, whatever. So I'm trying to provide like everything. At least I'm trying. There will be like this starter kit, so to say, where you have the software, you have one hardware module, and like a bunch of actuators to test and try. And yeah, we'll see where this kind of will lead. Could it be a dedicated shop also for actuators? I think that could be helpful, but we'll also look forward to the feedback from first users, what they found the most useful.
That's amazing. Thank you very much.
All right, I put the next on. Markus Klug asked if it's possible to use the app to generate code for a DRV265L connected to an Arduino. I think that's one of the questions I should delegate to the LinkedIn event. Maybe post those special questions in the LinkedIn event and tag Thomas so he can take care of those later. I'm afraid this is
short answer, yes.
Okay. Or
long answer, separate.
Perfect. Okay, make sure to connect on LinkedIn. That sounds really good. Another direct message from Arpit Agarwal, sorry, senior UX designer at Accenture, asking if you have any future plans to have such a kind of workshop in India after Delphi.
Not on my timeline yet, to be honest. A very good question. I would love to do more workshops also in the close future. There's actually one lined up in Berlin rather soon. There will be one beginning of next year in Dresden over here. if I have the chance to go to India, I would love to. But let's see, yeah, when there will be a chance.
So invitations via LinkedIn are welcome. I have Simon Fürbis asking, yeah, well, actually, I think that's clear, right? It is possible to add custom actuators.
Yes, at the moment, it's possible to add any electromagnetic actuator to it. We'll see what the future brings to also other technologies, but there's already like a broad range of electromagnetic actuators that you're used to having in like your phones, in gaming controllers, etc., to explore and play around with.
Right, I have another one from Osborne Okokwa at ITIL, IT product manager. He's asking if you have any future plans to do such a workshop in Nigeria. I guess this is another one where you should discuss invitations via LinkedIn. He'd be glad to have you guys come around. And another one from Hannah El Bagari, project manager. What context do you imagine people using the prototype, and how will you try to bring this product to the market and popularize it? So it's workshops?
Mm-hmm.
It's crowdfunding, maybe?
Yeah, it's a good question. So actually, the first focus where we're trying to get in, or we see the biggest benefit also is, the workshops, mainly for educational purposes. It's, of course, I'm a designer myself, so that's the natural first target group, but there's also other areas such as human-machine interactions, just psychology, engineering even. So there are a lot of different areas, I think, during studying where this could be super helpful for students to experience actually what are actuators, what's the frequency. That's where also a lot of people are thrown off, what's even the opportunities. So that's kind of the first area, but we're also trying we're seeing a big opportunity in the whole field of like product design itself, or interaction design in agencies, consultancies, R&D departments, where it's about how could future product interactions look like. And also over there, it's the big opportunity because you can very quickly elaborate if it's even worth investing into haptics. Because also being honest, this isn't like the magic answer to any interaction problem. Somewhere it will work, in other cases it won't work at all. But the toolkit will allow you to quickly come to this point without investing a lot of time and money, resources, just to end up realizing, well, maybe auditory feedback is the better way to go. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
If anybody else who posted in the chat wants to speak up, please go ahead. I don't have to read it all, and I won't misread your names, so please go ahead. There was, if there is no one there right now, there is one more from Stefan Hertel, head of HMI and UX. Is it planned to connect to other prototyping resources like ProtoPie?
Mm-hmm. It's also a very good question. ProtoPie, for the ones not familiar with it, is like the prototyping software for digital applications, UIs, etc. And it could definitely be possible because ProtoPie is very far on the end when it comes to haptics. There are like the close future answer is we're first trying to tackle more the physical products, connecting it to also sensors. What if you're coming closer to an object and it will vibrate? What if you squeeze it harder and it's kind of vibrating harder? You can hopefully understand. So that's the kind of short term, but long term, it could be super interesting to also look more into the digital world, maybe even the VR world. But yeah, we're trying to make it kind of very simple to use, and therefore limiting also the functionality in this first iteration before reaching out into other areas.
Thank you very much. There's more coming in. I'm trying to catch them all. We have Hamid Yahey asked asking, oh, that's a long title there, sorry, asking, what is your take on haptic feedback in autonomous future vehicles, especially when it comes to increasing safety?
Interesting question. I'm not the expert when it comes to automotive area, but there are a lot of opportunities in there, or that are already covered, or at least are on the brink of being covered. Like traditionally, or I think the first one was maybe in the wheel, where you get like a feedback if like a car is behind you. Now it immerses or breaches into the pedals or also the seat. So I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities, maybe even because I guess there's also the challenge in the autonomous vehicles that you might forget or you're too immersed. And so I think haptic feedback could also offer opportunity over there to feature a nice opportunity to grasp the attention again. Like before the big red display begins flashing or a loud tone is arising. So maybe something more subtle, but a bit earlier could be an interesting take on it. Would love to see some concepts on that. Feel free to ping me if you come across any interesting idea. Would be super curious.
All right. Well, we're not quite running out of questions, but still, if we have anybody who's not been daring to ask, you can step forward now, or I'll just read another one. There's several people interested in your private local surroundings. There's Kristen Keilt, IDSA innovation coach, asking if you could show us a little workbench area behind you. I guess that's your tinkering spot.
Yes. So I mentioned before, I'm a very curious type of guy, ending up in various different projects. So this is kind of my collection of stuff to just prototype some components in the left side drawer, like standard electronics components, cables, stuff, like a workbench for the whole soldering stuff, power management, Dremel, hardware tools, etc. Recently, I began assembling my PCBs on my own, and so there are some leftovers over there. Super interesting thing for anyone who's interested, but a bit nerve-wracking. And yeah, there's a 3D printer underneath. There's a submarine flowing over there, which is a different project. Yeah, maybe that answered some of it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for the insight. It's yeah, it looks like a real workspace there. That's nice. There's more faces showing. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I can't hear you. Sorry. Philippe, you're muted, I think. Yeah, there you are.
Thomas, yeah. So it was a nice presentation. Yeah. So my question is, like, to use this toolkit, why do we need any kind of? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. Okay. So to use this or to program this toolkit, do you need any kind of code like C or Java or anything, or and does it integrate with game engines like Unity or Unreal Engine, or do you need to use that?
There's no coding needed to prototype or design the haptic feedback in the composer. I think that's the big advantage. It's really like drag and drop. If you want to lower it, just like the intensity, just adjust the slider, type in some numbers. If you want to define the frequency or duration, just do the same, and you can directly play it back. So there's no coding involved at all. But if you want to do it, there will be the possibility to export what you designed as a code snippet that you can use in your project. Concerning the last part, there is no implementation yet for Unity, etc. It's not, I think I mentioned it before, on our direct timeline, because we first want to focus on really like hands-on physical product exploration and prototyping, but I'm not saying there isn't a chance that might sometime come up.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
I've got also another question. I will just talk. How do you? Oh no, I lost my question. Moment, we'll come back. Maybe another one want to join. One moment.
I can just read one that's totally different field. Probably, I have a IoT security researcher, Julian S, asking if you consider cybersecurity issues in developing haptics solutions.
Very good question. Again, I'm not the expert in IT security, etc. So, to be honest,
sorry, IoT. Sorry.
Oh, good. I can't really answer, to be honest. If you have a more specific, maybe question to a specific topic, I might help out. But yeah, to be honest, I don't have the experience to answer that question.
Simon, you're back.
Yeah, I remember my question. So your project is to prototype haptics, but what if I want to export haptics for my productive work in my further application, like I don't know, Arduino, where I need my patterns? You said you can export the code in a way, but which way is it? Is there kind of yeah, code that I can reuse in several kind of apps, or yeah?
I hope I understood it right. But yeah, you can imagine it like you've designed like a track with a vibration, the brake, and maybe a click, whatever. And then you can export those kind of blocks as a code snippet where it's embedded, like which intensity is it, which duration, etc. And you could like paste it into your Arduino code. You could hook it up to an ESP, etc., and then kind of switch back and forth, replacing it with a new design. Hope that answered kind of the area.
Yeah, so it's kind of a manual translation of using your UI and translating it into my environment. Maybe in the future it will be solved from a haptic standard. I heard from Interhaptics that MPEG should get a new standard, and it would be nice to be able to design something in your application and save it as kind of MPEG and reuse it in other apps. We're looking forward to get something a solid process in the future.
Yeah, super good point. Like what you mentioned, Interhaptics, Apple has its own formats in AHAP. So yeah, I'm really curious also what the future over there brings. I think there's a lot of cooking and bubbling that we'll see in close future. So very good point kind of to keep track of that. And yeah, I think that's also in line with making or providing something that is as broad or as flexible as possible, or as compatible actually as possible with a lot of devices.
Thomas, I have a quick question as well. So one thing is, I love the website also just from a usability perspective. The UI, it feels good, and makes you want to go there and actually learn, even if you're not interested in haptics. And a lot of my friends that I started talking to about actually explored it, had a lot of great feedback for it. And I wanted to know, I guess people can just join you and connect with you on LinkedIn if they have any questions. But I had a particular question now about your own things. You love tinkering, you love playing around, and I moved from immersion to Unity, and at Unity, even though there are some ways to implement haptics for video games, I don't believe, from my personal perspective, that it's at the standard that we want. And it connects a bit with what Simon was saying. We worked a bit in the past together. I host the Haptics Club podcast on Twitter, where we try to interview people on the bi-weekly basis. I would love to get you there, by the way, just to give a chance to showcase Haptics Labs there. But most people that are in our industry, they're really in silos and they do their own exploration on their side. Have you, what excites you basically? For example, on my side, it's the combination of multiple haptics feedback and trying to combine temperature with pressure and vibration. What is something that excites you in the future that you're trying to explore right now?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'd love to join you if there's an opportunity, of course, and share my work. What excites me, or what I would love to spend more time exploring, is what you also covered a bit, like these multimodal experiences. It's extremely interesting how sound influences your perception of haptics. Provide also maybe the functionality in that, or also looking outside of like basic vibrotactile actuators. If you're thinking about like also something like squeezing you or like sliding across your skin, or like there is one bracelet, I forgot the name, that gets like that squeezes you. I think when somebody was trying to reach out in that direction. So kind of those areas I would love to explore and also make a bit more accessible to play around with, because they will also amplify like future product interaction. So I'm super curious what people, students, designers would come up with those more advanced or more crazy types of feedback.
I'm just reading
a question. Thanks for
Yeah, I just have a corresponding question. Does your tool also allow to add sounds in combination? And I guess it does, right? I mean, it's
not
possible.
Officially, I would say, but it's also interesting, like haptics is just sound you don't hear in a way, because it's like frequency that doesn't penetrate or isn't meant for your ears in the frequency. So what you can actually do, or what I found extremely interesting during the workshop that we did in Delft, there was one group or one student that used it actually just for sound, like those different actuators. If you, for example, put it to like a resonant body, you can hear what's going on. So you could basically put like a sound file in it, and you could feel like the bass, for example. So in that sense, it's already possible, but also in close future, I'd love to be able to combine both, like having a haptic track, having a sound track, and playing around with those, how they influence each other.
Cool. And I have another question from Hamid. He's asking what your take is on Facebook's haptic gloves. What your opinion is, I guess, your judgment.
Again, over here, I can't really give an expert answer. My focus in the past was really on like tactile feedback in like everyday devices. So it stood a bit away from VR, AR, haptics, or like kinesthetic, like force feedback on the glove. What excites me is always like if like larger companies found interest in the topic, because that means it will just gather more like prominency on haptics in general. So I'm looking forward to what comes out of there. But yeah, can't really give any more insights on this glove specifically.
Very good then. Are there any other questions? Let us hear. Otherwise, thanks a lot for the participation. I've had really great specific questions today. I hope you can connect to this and think it on LinkedIn. As I said, feel free to tag Thomas when you're asking questions on this project in the talent track event on LinkedIn. Well, I'm flashed really. Thomas, thanks a lot. It was great having you. It was great seeing this project. I don't see any fresh questions, so I think I'll close it here. But feel free to go on LinkedIn. I definitely check in and keep an eye on it. It was really interesting. And it sounds like a lot of fun. If you need anything, like if you're planning any crowdsourcing activities, I think this was a great moment advertise. I hope people will come towards you. It sounds like you have a great community set up already. Sorry, Simon, another question? No, just applauding. Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, great job. Really, it was fun. It was impressive. Thanks a lot. I really hope it goes on in the community. Yeah, I'll close it here. We have our next deep dive with Alexander Pronsky, lead designer of MacPaw Inc. Wednesday in 2 weeks, same place, same time, December 8th. So feel free to join in again. Information will be in the chat too. And as we said already, the current call for entries for the UX Design Awards 2020 is still open for another 3 days until the, plus 3 days, so until the 3rd of December. Yeah, stay tuned. There's more of this coming, I hope, and you will find a recording of this on LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm already looking forward to watch it again. It was really, really impressive. Good presentation, good questions. Thanks a lot to everybody.